was a kid, there was a place. A dark place. They closed it down and let it rot. But the things that lived there, they come back.
Woo! Who's ready to check into the Overlook Hotel once again? Almost 40 years later, we have a sequel to The Shining. Now, Stanley Kubrick is my favorite film director of all time. In 1980, he gave us the horror classic The Shining with Jack Nicholson, which was, of course, based on the 1977 Stephen King novel. In 2013, King followed up that story with the sequel, Dr. Sleep. Now we've got the big screen adaptation. And what's funny is Stephen King famously distanced himself from The Shining movie. He didn't like what Kubrick did with the story, how he changed it around, didn't care for the ending. This one, though, he's much more on board. He was definitely supportive of the script from the get-go, so he says this kind of redeems the other film. Ewan McGregor plays the older Danny Torrance. He's all grown up. He's got some addiction issues, though, so he's still haunted by his past. I gotta say, Ewan is fantastic in this role. Not only him, but Rebecca Ferguson right there, who plays the main villain, very effective. Now, this movie doesn't have the conventional jump scares like a lot of horror films these days. I thought it was very refreshing in that sense. A lot on its mind, so it plays off psychological trauma and horror, and as I mentioned, those addiction problems. So it's got some intelligence behind a lot of these scares, which make them a lot more poignant. Let's get another look.
I-95. Barry, the crow, the snake, and a few others. The trees haven't changed that much, so maybe Massachusetts, but they're close.
Rose?
Didn't see her. But they're coming.
Yeah, so the Danny Torrance character teams up with that young girl. She's got similar powers like him. She's imbued with that shining. But then Rebecca Ferguson, meanwhile, has this gang of, they're sort of like soul-sucking zombie vampires, and they're going around trying to steal people's shine, or their souls, if you will. So they have to try and stop them. What's interesting about this film, it stands alone in the beginning as its own film, but then as it gets towards the middle and the end, it's tethered to the original so much, and that's where it lost points for me. They recast some of the original characters from The Shining. I didn't really like that. They had the Overlook Hotel played prominently towards the end, so it will always kind of live in the shadow much more than your average sequel, but it does have a lot of strong acting, some pretty sensational scares. There's actually one really distressing sequence involving Jacob Tremblay. Yeah, he's right there getting into the van. There's a really chilling part with him in this movie, and some beautiful stuff too with Ewan McGregor, because he plays an orderly who's helping people cope with their end-of-life care in a hospital. And there's some really beautiful stuff there. It doesn't always work, though. The gimmicky kind of bad guy stuff with Rebecca Ferguson and her gang, it was a little bit cliched and silly at times, and that speaks sometimes to King's later writing. There are pacing problems in the middle. This movie is a bit of an endurance test. It's like 2.5 hours long, so it does suffer from that. And again, it just relies a lot too heavily on fan service when it comes to the original Shining, but there's still a lot of great things about it. It's got an excellent musical score as well, very creepy, atmospheric vibes. So there are some problems. I will recommend it, though. It's very spooky and sinister, so I'm going 3 out of 5 for Dr. Sleep. Okay, there you have it. Lots going on in the box office this weekend. That might be one to check out.